Welcome to the enchanting new chapter of this captivating and marvelous story, brimming with anticipation for more intriguing and mysterious twists. Dive into this podcast and stay tuned till the very end. The battle began. Men halted on the edge of one of the gardens, lying on the ground among the trees, aiming their weapons towards the fields, trying to peer through the mist. They could see other men running, some shouting and waving. Henry's unit watched and listened attentively, engrossed in discussing the rumors they had heard. One man said, "I met a boy from the Maine state, and he said his unit fought the entire rebel army for 4 hours, killing about 5,000 of them. He believes another battle like this will end the war completely." The noise intensified, and Henry and his companions fell silent in their positions. They could see the flag fluttering angrily amidst the smoke, with hazy images of military units nearby. A confused group of men fled through the fields. A deafening shell passed like a storm over the heads of the reserve soldiers, landing in the orchard, exploding and scattering brown soil and pine needles everywhere. Bullets whistled among the branches, and branches and leaves fell as if invisible scythes were cutting through. Many men had to cover their heads. Lieutenant of Henry's battalion was hit in the hand, cursing until a tense laughter spread among the unit members. The lieutenant pressed on his wound to prevent blood from staining his trousers, and the unit leader tied a cloth around the injury. The battle flag fluttered madly, as if struggling for liberation. Smoke filled the air with horizontal flashes, revealing men running swiftly from the fight. Their numbers increased until it seemed the entire battalion was fleeing. The flag drooped as if dying, its movement signaling despair. Henry felt panic from the looks of the fleeing men, realizing that nothing in the world could stop him from escaping if the opportunity arose. Yet the men in his unit clung to their positions, standing side by side, trembling and growing paler. In the midst of the chaos, a solitary thought crossed Henry's mind. The beast that caused the other units to flee had not yet appeared. He decided to watch for it, thinking that if he could do so, he would be able to escape faster than anyone else. The first shot. There were many moments of anticipation, and Henry recalled the street in his city when everyone awaited the arrival of the circus parade in spring. Suddenly, someone shouted, "They've come!" Murmurs and movements passed among the men who pulled bullet boxes closer, changing positions cautiously. "They've come! They've come!" The gun barrels aimed. Across the smoke-covered field, a group of men in gray uniforms appeared, shouting loudly. Henry, in a sudden panic, wondered if his rifle was loaded. He tried to remember when he had last loaded it but was too distressed. A general, without a hat, stood beside the colonel leading Henry's battalion, gesturing angrily. The brigadier shouted, "You should have scared them off! You should have scared them off!" Amid the colonel's confusion, he stuttered, "Well, General, we'll do what we can, General." The general nodded with a mix of anger, spurred his horse away. A man near Henry exclaimed, "The time has come! The time has come!" The battalion leader paced back and forth behind the men, repeating, "Don't fire, young men! Don't fire unless I tell you! Wait until they get closer." Henry glanced at the enemy in the field, halted his thoughts about whether his rifle was loaded or not. Before he could prepare, before he could convince himself he was on the brink of combat, he aimed his rifle and fired the first random shot, continuing to operate his weapon. Suddenly, Henry felt a concern for himself. It was as if he was part of something bigger. The only thing he knew now was that no matter what he was in trouble and couldn't leave his battalion anymore. He remained attentive to his comrades standing around him, as if a bond of brotherhood had been born amidst the smoke and the threat of death. Finally, the battle. Henry worked swiftly, his ears filled with the annoying noise, and as soon as the sound passed, he felt intense anger, as if a beast was closing in on him. Henry fought madly, surrounded by men busy reloading rifles and firing. Officers stood behind, encouraging the men. Lieutenant of Henry's unit met a soldier who had fled at the gunfire's onset, forcefully bringing him back to the front line. The soldier returned, but his heart was clearly not in the battle. He struggled to reload his rifle, and the lieutenant had to assist him. Men fell here and there, and Henry's unit leader was killed early in the battle. His body lay at rest, but his face displayed a look of astonishment and sorrow, as if killed by a friend, not an enemy. A man next to Henry was hit by a bullet, blood streaming down his face. In the end, a shout echoed through the ranks, and the gunfire ceased. When the smoke cleared, Henry saw the gray-clad men retreating. The enemy scattered in groups, and some soldiers in Henry's unit began cheering, while silence fell on many. When Henry calmed down, he felt as if he would suffocate. He drank a long, cold sip from his canteen. One man shouted, "We've pushed them back!" Henry was elated, surrounded by many sprawled bodies, as if they had fallen from the sky. He observed the battles from a distance and marveled that he wasn't in the midst of the fighting. Looking around, he noticed the blue sky, the sun rising over trees and fields, and was struck by the wonder that nature remained unaffected by all those wars. Escape of men. Henry felt a dizzy spell as he looked around. He picked up his hat from the ground, adjusted it, and secured his shoelaces. Finally, it was over. The test had passed, and the hardships of war were behind them. Henry was elated, confident that they had overcome adversity. Other men shared the same pride, shaking hands and assisting the wounded among them. Suddenly, cries of astonishment erupted among the soldiers. One man shouted, "They've come again!" Henry saw people emerging from the woods, and the tilted flag advancing swiftly. Shells, initially ignored by the soldiers, now exploded around them, resembling violent blossoms amid the grass and trees. The men sighed and moved slowly and with difficulty. As they noticed the approaching enemy, they rebelled against their duty. "Why isn't anyone sending reinforcements?" one asked. Another replied, "We won't survive a second attack. I didn't come here to fight the whole damn rebel army alone." Henry stared in disbelief. He never thought the fight would be imminent. He waited as if everyone would stop and admit it was a mistake, but gunfire erupted again, and chaos ensued. Henry's neck trembled, his hands stiff. He imagined the enemy soldiers as formidable iron machines, appearing like dragons amidst the smoke. Suddenly, a man near Henry, engrossed in loading his rifle, fled, screaming loudly. Another, seemingly brave, threw down his rifle and ran. No shame showed on his face. He fled like a blinded rabbit, colliding with a tree and falling to the ground. Other men started running amid the smoke. Henry, losing his gun, hat, and with his coat open, ran imagining the worst. He felt his sense of direction slipping away, death and injury threatened from every direction. Henry ran away from the events, and finally, he saw a general on horseback. Sometimes generals were surrounded by others on horseback, and sometimes they rode alone. Henry stayed next to the general, trying to eavesdrop on what he was saying. Perhaps the general would ask him for information, and Henry would tell him about the confusion engulfing the front lines because he knew everything. Henry wanted to tell the general that it was a mistake to sit here without making any effort to stop the death that was claiming lives behind him. What fool would say it was the men's duty to retreat? An officer rushed to the general and said, "By the heavens, they did it! They stopped them!" The general began shouting to his soldiers, "We've beaten them! We've definitely beaten them!" If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and sharing the video with your friends. Thanks for tuning in.